Hi, it's Gitanjali. Welcome. This week I am joined by the wonderful Roisin to celebrate her coaching success story. Welcome, Roisin.
Thanks, Gitanjali. Nice to be here.
I want to hear a little bit more about who you are. Tell people what you do in the world and what you're passionate about.
So I'm Roisin. I work for a large global IT company, and I've been there for about 7 years. In the last kind of 18 months to 2 years, started in my first role in a senior leadership team, which is what kind of started me then on the journey to finding more out about coaching, about how I can help myself and personal development. And now I work in the kind of operations delivery space as an associate delivery executive for a public sector customer.
And what were you struggling with when we started our coaching journey together? What was life like?
So I think, so I just, as I mentioned, I'd just taken a kind of step up into my first role into a senior leadership team and was plagued with imposter syndrome thoughts, self-doubt, self-criticism. It was the first time I was in a new team with a new group of people. It was at the very beginning of lockdown. So my typical habits of making relationships with people or building rapport were then all virtual and kind of changed. And I really struggled with that transition and kind of entering into that journey of finding out who I am as a leader and who I wanted to be as a leader. And I think a mix of all those things led me into this kind of world of imposter syndrome and doubt. And I thought, right, I need to do something about this.
When we had our original conversation, I remember you saying that you'd done a course with Tony Robbins, and you were obviously looking, right? You were personal development and reflection and growth was an area of interest for you. But even with that in mind, was there any resistance to saying yes for going forward with the coaching?
So I think for me, a really obvious and typical one probably was just the investment. As you say, I was so keen for the kind of personal development and learning and growth. And it was just a significant investment compared to other things I'd done. And so nervousness came in around that. And that was probably really the only factor that made me and ah as to whether it's something I should do.
And how did you get over the and ahhing then? What made you eventually say, yes, I'm doing it?
A lot of thinking and analysing, and which I try now to do less of since the coaching. A lot of back and forth, a lot of asking people's opinions. But I think for me, it was almost at a time I knew I needed to do something. I needed something to change. I couldn't continue kind of going on as I was. I felt I knew I had the answers in me. I just needed help to get there. So I didn't necessarily want to go down a kind of mentoring or training route of, kind of someone telling you the answers. I wanted to work with someone to help me get there myself. And that was really, I knew that as a kind of factor when I started looking for things. So I think it was gosh, why not? I need to make the change. Let's see how it goes.
And you did. And so what has changed? What are the results? Give us an example or two of things that have changed for you professionally and even maybe personally.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me, which maybe sounds like a less tangible thing, but actually for me has kind of made the biggest change, is that I feel like I trust myself far more. So in things like if it comes to making those decisions now, I'm able to listen to myself more, trust myself more. I'm not looking for external validation or reassurance as much. One of the things that's really stuck with me, and you touched on it there around, I was kind of looking for something that, I'd done Tony Robbins training, I'd done other things, and I was always looking for the next thing. And one really kind of pinpoint moment for me is kind of when you said, like, you don't need to look for anything else, Roisin, like you're whole. And I think that's what I've taken. I'm whole. I'm enough. I've got everything I need. I don't need to keep searching for an answer, because the answer is me and myself. And that feels like a really kind of, intangible thing to kind of say, but I think the calmness that comes with that, and the kind of peace and the kind of inner confidence, just that you've got your own back and that you can trust yourself. It's the result of those that's kind of incredibly tangible, and that can make difference in, as you say, not just in work but kind of personal life as well.
So what's come of that then tangibly, when you said actually that inner sense of calm? And I love that for you, that transformation has occurred, right, to that way of being. How has that then played out? And you touched on a little bit about decision making, for example. What else has maybe been a tangible example of something that's changed as a result of that epic shift in you?
I feel like I'm trusting myself more. So, for example, maybe at work, showing up with more confidence, holding myself or carrying myself differently in terms of when I go into things or into things I'm not sure about, being comfortable with the uncomfortable, and not being afraid of those things that we don't know or trying to control everything. I think I'm far more at peace with living day to day, living more in the now, worrying less about tomorrow or the future. Again, that's probably very intangible.
No, because that plays out, as you said, in terms of how are you showing up in meetings, how are you showing up in your relationships outside of work and your friendships. Take me to an aha moment then when you knew that the coaching was working.
I think an aha moment for me was when we had our one-to-one session, and you started, and obviously I'd done before we went on, going, right, got an hour, need to make the most of it. What's the best I can get, what's the best outcome from this that I want, and I kind of written it down to come in and make the most of the time. And you started the session by saying, so if a miracle was to happen in the next hour, what would that miracle look like? And obviously that miracle looked like nothing I'd written down, because kind of without realizing I'd limited it with all well, you've only got an hour, it's you've got time to communicate. So without even realizing it, I'd restricted myself by what is my best possible outcome in an hour. When you ask me what a miracle could be, like, it just opens up a whole new world of possibilities. And I kind of thought, caught me by surprise, thought, what would my miracle be? Thinking, well, I'd need like a lifetime of coaching to get to that miracle. And I really felt like we got there in that hour. And that for me was like, the kind of biggest aha moment, I think, and the biggest impact in a kind of single session.
And you mentioned like a world of possibilities opening up, and obviously we are possibilists, and we're on a mission to create 1 billion possibilists in the world. What is possible now that seemed impossible when we began?
And it almost feels really cheesy, but like me, myself is possible. I have got everything I need to do whatever I want to do. So whatever I want to be possible in the world, I feel like I've now got the kind of tools and ability to create that. And if that doesn't go to plan, because I know I can't predict the future, or sometimes things don't happen, how we expect, I've got the tools to be able to kind of deal with that and cope with that, and change direction to a different possibility.
And what is it then about the way that we work together when you think about, in this inner circle where we're coming together twice a month and you're with other people that you didn't necessarily know beforehand? What is it about the way that we work together that's enabled these possibilities, this transformation, and these results that you've shared?
I think there's such trust within the group and such kind of psychological safety amongst us to really feel like we can share things we want to share, and feel safe in that. And I think one of the real values I've found in the group is that you might turn up to a coaching session thinking you need coaching on one thing, someone else asks for coaching on another thing, and even though initially you'd be like, oh, that's not relevant to me, kind of 10-20 minutes later you're like, oh no, that's what I needed coaching on. And I think that's why there's such value for me in that group coaching, that you're able to be coached on things you didn't even realize you needed. And there's such kind of power and value in that. And also gaining the insights of other people and their experiences and their, even just their kind of compassion and empathy from when they've been going through the same thing, or, you know, they're facing the same thing at that moment. It's such a sense of kind of acceptance and relief. And I definitely go through my life now and I go, oh, that's something I need to take to coaching on Thursday. Or I can talk about. So it's like you've got a you know, there's something always there that I know if something's going to worry me or panic me, if it would normally do that, I can go, oh, I can just take that on Thursday and I know it's going to be okay.
I love that. And the celebrations as well. Like, let's save them for the Thursdays, or put them in our group chat and share them with each other. So what's really surprised you about that format?
I think the value of being with other people. I think on paper, if you looked at kind of, or maybe a selection of us, on paper we'd be quite different. And, you know, I'm not a parent and some are parents. You know, I live in the UK, some don't live in the UK. So you'd think on paper, actually, we'd have nothing in common. There would be no kind of common ground there. And I think what surprised me is that every single week we all find value in the conversation, even if it's not directly relevant to us. There's always something. A lot of the talks we've had on parenting and coaching around that, I go, that's a great thing for me to take away as a leader, and I can now apply that in a leadership context. Or, you know, how I work with kind of friends or family. So I think that's what surprised me the most, the relevance of the coaching despite being kind of such a diverse group.
And that is the wonderful thing that, you know, we love to witness the transformation of other people and then contributing to it as well, as you said, with insights, and you sharing your insights with them, which is such a beautiful thing. So take me back to the beginning of your coaching journey, almost a year ago now. What's a word that you would use to describe where you were then, and one to describe where you are now, Roisin?
Where I was then, I'd say lost. That constantly looking for something didn't feel right, I needed something. And now I would say grounded. I know I've got everything I need, it's right here. Everything else is just tools and methods to help me kind of grow. So lost to grounded.
I love that. And if you were to describe the inner circle experience in 3 words, what would come to mind?
Inspiring, trusting, and unexpected.
I love that. So if someone's watching this and maybe they're thinking of investing for themselves, or maybe they're thinking about investing for their teams, what would you say to them? Because, you know, there's some resistance always, whether it's time or money. And actually, maybe you could speak to that a little bit. Like, what would you say to someone who was thinking, well, how do I justify the time away from my desk? What would you say to them?
I think I now view this coaching as almost like one of my vital lifelines. To the point where I'm not sure what I'd do without it. I need it as much as food and water. So any kind of time it takes me away from the desk gives me back tenfold going then back into the workplace. Whether that's kind of teaching me how to be more productive, whether it's changing my behaviours to make things more effective, or to be able to respond to people far kind of quicker than I would normally, because I know how to build relationships more differently with people and how to kind of work with people. So it's not even a, you know, oh, if you do this productivity thing, you know, you'll get twice the time back. It's, I can't imagine not doing this anymore, which maybe sounds quite over the top, but it's genuinely how I feel about it. It's worth kind of every time I put into it.
Did you ever feel like you had to justify it to a boss or a colleague and say, oh, this is what I'm doing with this time, for 90 minutes with my coaching group?
I So one thing this has probably helped me with is I was a big justifier of any money I'd spent, of anything ever, because I think it came from that lack of trusting in myself. So I'd always go through, my family laugh about it, because I'd make a purchase of maybe even something that was just £10 and would list all the reasons to them as to why it was okay that I'd spent that money, and they wouldn't care. And I think now it's more like, actually, I know this is an investment to me. I know the business is getting value out of me doing this. I know me personally is getting value out of me doing this. And kind of just trusting that the value I get from this is so huge. And I think if I was to kind of need to justify it to kind of people back at work, it's not just, there's so many tangible skills as well that you can refer to, and productivity tools I can use and pass on to others, and ways of dealing with the customer and building better customer relationships, which are going to bring so much value back into my company. So there's so many tangible tools and things as well that I can relate to them, that I think as soon as some of them were kind of laid on the table, there wouldn't be any doubt of the value it gave me.
Amazing. So then if someone is like, oh, feeling quite inspired listening to Roisin, and they're considering it either for themselves or for their teams, what would you say to them?
Just do it. Because what's the worst that can happen? We talked about decision making last week in our coaching group, and actually so many decisions can be reversed if they don't turn out to be the right ones. I'm pretty convinced that this is going to be the right one if they do just make it. But actually, if they try and it's not for them, they've not lost out on anything. They've just gained new experience and learned something from it and built their network and made new people. So all of those reasons seem worth it to me to take a chance and try it.
Well, I'm so glad you took a chance and tried it, and it's been wonderful to witness your transformation from lost to grounded, Roisin. Thank you so much for sharing your insights today.
Thanks, Lisa.